I said I saw the child inside John that he experienced Star Wars. I sit there with Peyton. You see your crew just staring at Mark, and you realize they're remembering what it meant to them. And you realize that you've been a part of constructing something that's giving that experience to people. This good feeling, which fundamentally Star Wars should deliver a good feeling, an uplifting feeling in you and your family, your kids, whatever.
Oh, greetings once again, Bucketheads. Mayvar Tigar. Welcome to the 85th Quinlan Vos vindicating episode of Mando Vision, Nargai Tom. And thank you so much for checking out this small, independent Star Wars podcast. Remember, the best way to reach out to us is via social media at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Please be sure to like, subscribe, share this show with all the other Mandalorians in your covert. And hey, if you're listening, why not make sure you're liking, subscribing, and sharing the show with all your other Mandalorians that you want to spread the word to. Good Lord. Off to a rocky start. Rocky start. But that's okay. We're here. We're having fun. And that's all that really matters. We have an exciting episode today. Again, we're kind of filling the void of Bad Batch Fridays being done for the time being. And yeah, we got some stuff to talk about. Some exciting things have happened. Some exciting things have occurred in the world of Star Wars. And we're going to talk a little bit about those things. But the main emphasis for today's episode is going to be Jedi Knight Quinlan Vos. Jedi Master Quinlan Vos at some point too. Spoilers, he gets a promotion. Quinlan is a Jedi Knight that I am a really big fan of. He hasn't quite gotten his due in the main canon necessarily. You know, he gets a reference. He's referred to in Episode 3. And they recently did the Dark Disciple novelization. That was supposed to be a big arc of episodes of Star Wars The Clone Wars back in Season 6 before the show was unceremoniously canceled by Disney after they acquired Lucasfilm. So those got scrapped, but eventually they sort of distilled those episodes into the Dark Disciple novelization. And it's sort of... I just recently read it for the first time. I'm catching up on a lot of my Star Wars books right now. You know, I had to put a lot of those Star Wars books, unfortunately, got put to the side while I was finishing my time at San Diego State University. Now I'm getting to catch up on all the Star Wars books that I missed out on when I was back in school. So yeah, I'm catching up on some things. Maybe you're like, yeah, you know, we know about Dark Disciple. Come on. But I'm going to talk about Quinlan Vos, and we're going to talk about we're kind of do that thing where we compare and contrast the canon versus the Legends part of the universe, because this is a character that really thrived in the Legends universe. And so much so that he came to George Lucas's attention, and they decided to make a reference to him in Episode 3. And then, when they decided to do Star Wars The Clone Wars, they spent even more time with him. Excuse me for a second. I want to give a piece of podcasting advice to anyone out there who's thinking of doing a professional podcast. Before you start your show, whatever you do not shove like a handful of crackers into your mouth before you start your show. I'm choking to death right now. It's kind of like it's sort of what I imagine it would feel like when Vader is using the Force on you. I feel like you know, any Imperial officer around Vader at that time. You know, you don't want to mess around with him. You don't want to be the next admiral to get choked out via the Force. You don't want to be the next Admiral Ozzel. You don't want to be Captain Nita. No dice. All right, so let's get into our show proper. We do have something else to talk about first and foremost. We will be getting into Star Wars. Actually, I should say Disney Gallery, Star Wars The Mandalorian, the making of the Season 2 finale that dropped on the streaming platform just the other day. And everyone quickly rushed to the internet to spoil the holy heck out of it. So I hope you've had a chance to watch it. We will be talking, not in any overwhelming depth about it, just kind of like a broad sense of some of the nice things they say, some of the fun things they talk about and reasons why you should check it out if you haven't watched it already. But then, yeah, we're going to talk about Quinlan. So you know what that means. You know what it's time for. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
Apology accepted, Captain Nida.
All right, buckets are firmly in place, so let's talk about it. Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian, the making of the season 2 finale. Again, I hope you've all watched this by now, but I know not everyone's kind of into this documentary series that Disney Plus has been doing for the show. Even though I find it quite enjoyable, I do understand the people who maybe don't want to kind of break the magic of the Mandalorian, of Star Wars, and kind of getting that look behind the scenes at the way the sausage is made, if you will forgive the metaphor there. You know, sometimes it is a little distracting to kind of see like, oh, they're just on a stage, they're on a set. I want to pretend like this is real. And, you know, maybe you don't break it down to those rudimentary terms, but I understand the appeal. But I'm so intrigued by the process, you know, knowing how they brought this all to life, how they put it all together. I've really enjoyed the series very, very much. You know, and I think I mentioned it again on the podcast. Star Wars is the first time that I paid attention to who wrote these stories, who directed these movies. You know, George Lucas was one of the first Hollywood people whose names was like seared into my brain. It's like, I want to know who that dude is, you know, and how he came up with Star Wars and how he made all this happen. And that was when I was still at a fairly young point. And I was like, yeah, lightsabers are real. Why can't I get one when I turn 21 or whatever? So I guess I've always sort of had that interest, and I like being able to see how this technology is employed, all the links they went to get a Luke Skywalker that we hadn't seen before. I mean, this is after Return of the Jedi, and long before he would pop up again at the tail end of The Force Awakens. So it's a Luke who's different, and the links they went to kind of get it right. You know, having the body double, having Mark Hamill come in, the different process for the de-aging and the deep fakes, and all these different things they were doing. I found it all very, very interesting. The links they went to keep it secret. The use of Plo Koon as sort of like a decoy red herring to throw people off the scent if they were to even ferret that out. You know, so like I like all that secrecy because I have talked about it probably more so on my other podcast, the Tomcast podcasts. I don't care for spoilers. I try very, very hard to avoid spoilers. When I see movies or TV shows or whatever's coming on, I don't want to have read about it first. That, for me, that takes a lot of enjoyment out of it. I like the surprise element of things, you know. And again, going back to my youth and back to Star Wars, you know, when you're a little kid, or when I was a little kid, watching The Empire Strikes Back, and you get the mind-shattering revelation that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father, and then like you're like, is that true? Is that true? Is he lying? And you have to ponder these things. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy movies and TV and just storytelling in general so much. I love that drama, that suspense, that mystery, that not knowing what the next page, what the next scene, you know, has for you. So I am not a spoiler person at all. I really, really, really try hard to avoid them. Even trailers can be a touch too much. Though Marvel and Disney have gotten a little bit better about, you know, red herrings in their trailers and including scenes that don't actually end up in the final cut. And that could be, some people are upset by that because they find it misleading. You know, bait and switch is often a term thrown around a lot of the times nowadays. I'm fine with it. I want to watch that movie or show and have a whole new experience and not know what's coming next. So I love the links they went to. Hearing from the creative people involved is always a joy. It's always great to hear from Dave Filoni. It's always great to hear from Faverou on this show. And this time around, talking about season 2, Faverou seems to have like a better understanding of the fandom and of the sort of universal love that people have for the show, and that these big swings they're taking are not only paying off, but I mean they're completely landing with the fans, and so it's great to hear Faverou talk about these things in a little bit of a less guarded manner than I think he was in season 1, where, you know, it sort of felt like I don't know. I don't think I don't think he was like on the defensive by any means, but he just seems to have embraced all of the accolades now at this point, and they know they have something special going on, and he's just kind of leaning into it. We get to see a little bit more of the collaborative process between Filoni and Faverou, which is wonderful. I really like the inclusion of Peyton Reed. Peyton Reed, who directs the season finale. And I think he talks rather elegantly about everything involved. His emotional reaction to reading the script, to then being able to trying to process, like, oh my God, like we have to do this now. We have to make this work, and we have to make this, work in a way that the fans are going to think is convincing. And so I really enjoyed this special. I think it's definitely worth watching. It's like 40-ish minutes or so. We used that great clip from Filoni at the beginning of this episode of the podcast. That one's been circulating for about a week or so. So I think most people had seen it at this point if they hadn't already heard it. So I loved including that in this week's episode. But I think my favorite little moment of the episode is when they talk about, they're Filoni and Faverou are sort of plotting out the Luke Skywalker moment, the scene, the reveal, the whole thing. And Filoni mentions to Faverou, like, well, you get Luke, you get R2. And Faverou sort of pauses, and you get sort of this backstory about how Faverou just absolutely loves R2-D2. And it talks about him seeing R2-D2 on the set and how it sort of took him back to his childhood and kind of reconnected him with his fandom in a way that he hadn't had to that point with the show. It's one of my favorite moments of the show because I've had that moment myself several times over the course of my Star Wars love. I mean, I remember it's a silly story. It wasn't even like an official Lucasfilm sponsored thing. It was just like a faction of the Star Wars fandom showed up at the opening night of Rogue One, and they brought their R2 unit with them, and he was awesome. And I paused and was like, "Oh, I'm taking a picture with R2-D2 because that thing is legit, and it's so cool." And that's happened a couple of different times for me as a fan. I mean, even being at Disneyland and getting my picture taken with Chewbacca was just like, just the Death Star in my brain exploded. There was no ray shielding on my my thermal ventilation shaft. It was no good. It was all gone. Thermal exhaust port. I know I said it wrong. I apologize. Apologies. Don't come after me for that. I was just so excited I slipped. So I recommend checking it out. It's a really fun little watch. If you're into the technology, if you're into understanding all the links they had to go to make that finale happen, I think you really enjoy it. I think I would have liked. The only thing I think I would have liked a little bit more is if they had sat down with Pedro Pascal or Katie Sackhoff or Ming-Na Wen or any of the actors that were in that final scene about what it was like for them to experience it and to be part of this big giant secret, especially in this day of social media. And one little person who's working on this process, Mark Hamill talks about it in depth. All it takes is one person in a lab doing color corrections to be like, hey, you know what I saw today on their social media account, and then it's over. It's over, and it could have all been ruined for us. But by incredible happenstance or miracles, if you believe in the divine, we got to experience Luke Skywalker's reveal. I would say very much. We experienced it in the moment. We lived that moment, and we saw it fresh. And it's funny at the beginning of the show of the special, Faverou talks about what he describes my exact feeling. It's like they're showing me all the things that are Luke. They're showing me the gloved hand. They're showing me the green lightsaber. You see the belt buckle, the hooded look, the black, very very Return of the Jedi look. And it's like all the clues are there that it's Luke, but that mystery is like, no, did they? What? No. I relived that moment because I still have an extremely emotional reaction when I watched the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian. I still weep at it. Not just the Luke Skywalker reveal. The whole episode has got this amazing emotional core to it. And by the end of it, I'm a blubbering, useless pile of goo on a couch with a blanket and 2 wiener dogs in my lap. So, and for Faverou to be able to take me back to that moment because he knew exactly how I felt, because he knew the doubts I was having. Like, no, wait, what? It was great. It was really, really great. So I do strongly urge people to check it out. It's 40-something minutes. What else you got to do? We're looking for new Star Wars stuff to keep us busy. Watch it, check it out, enjoy it. Some other Star Wars news that's come to light during this past week is from Thandiwe Newton, who talked about her time on Star Wars Solo as Val, the lover of Tobias Beckett, who would become one of Han Solo's sort of mentor-like characters, and sort of the ignominious ending that she receives in the film, and how that wasn't supposed to be the case, but apparently her escape scene was too complicated to shoot, and they didn't have enough time, so they just decided to blow her up instead, and that's a real shame. It's not a great look, and you're blowing up a strong female character, and I think if memory serves, she's the first big strong black female lead character in a Star Wars movie. So the optics on that are a little not so good. And I think I've talked about it before on the show. Solo is a movie that I've really come around on a lot over the years, but that is still a scene that to me just doesn't land quite right, because her sacrifice just sort of seems like, there had to be another way to do that, right? But it is what it is, and I agree with Tandaway Newton. It is unfortunate, not great. I wish they had done that better. Shoot, I wish he had made it all the way to the third act. That could have been a lot of fun to see how that would have played out with her and Beckett and Chewie and Han. I mean, it could have been a lot of fun. And then, bringing Kira into the whole thing could have been really interesting. It's a shame we'll never get to really revisit that again, or at least that character again. I mean, I suppose it is Star Wars. Like, you could conceivably bring that character back. There are ways to do such a thing in the comics, in a Disney Plus show, like the one I've been pushing for 3 years now, the Solo 2 as a Disney Plus series, exploring the underworld, the underbelly of the Star Wars galaxy, huts and bounty hunters and crime organizations, Crimson Dawn and Black Sun and the whole shebang. Sorry, turned into a pitch meeting all of a sudden there. But yeah, it's possible, but it seems unlikely that we'll get to revisit Val anytime soon, which is unfortunate. All right, we're going to pause for a quick break and then come back and talk about Quinlan Vos.
I would like to see the baby.
Jedi Master Quinlan Vos, always been one of my favorite characters, particularly in the era of the expanded universe. He has a really rich, interesting history. The canon has done a lot of stuff right by him, and a lot of it's very much based on that expanded universe. For a lot of fans, their first exposure to him, particularly in canon, comes in Season 3 of Star Wars The Clone Wars, where he teams up with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and they go on the hunt for Zero the Hutt, who you may remember from Season 2 has been broken out by Cad Bane. Actually, that might have been the end of Season 1. He has been broken out of Republic custody on Coruscant by Cad Bane and a gaggle of other bounty hunters. And now he's out and about. And it's time for Obi-Wan to bring him to justice. And he's going to do it with the help of Quinlan Vos, a rather unconventional Jedi. And Obi-Wan makes note of that. And we're going to talk about more about that particular episode when we get to it in the next season of our Star Wars The Clone Wars rewatch. But that's a really great take on the character. A really faithful interpretation of him. He is sort of a character that straddles the light and the dark. He is unconventional. He is sort of the Jedi's version of a secret operative in a lot of ways. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in very, very soon. Once we kind of get into his origins as a character, kind of where his creation came from. But yeah, as I mentioned in the opening of the show, they do a follow-up. They had plans. The team behind Star Wars The Clone Wars had a plan for Season 6. We know a lot of the plans. We know a lot of the stories they had. There was going to be Cad Bane versus Boba Fett. And there was going to be Quinlan Vos trying to infiltrate Dooku with the assistance of Asajj Ventress. And that ends up turning into the novel Dark Disciple. It is a story with Obi-Wan Kenobi. The Jedi Council. A little bit of spoilers for the book. So if you don't want to know this part of it, I understand. But for reasons, it's a bit of a stretch. But the Jedi are so desperate to end the war after a just incredible act of wartime atrocity by Count Dooku that they authorize Quinlan Vos to assassinate Count Dooku. And that's sort of how the book starts. And they decide, with the help of Obi-Wan Kenobi, they decide that the best way to do that is by getting close with his former apprentice, Asajj Ventress. So that kicks off the book, and this relationship that Asajj and Vos form over the course of the novel. And then, of course, because it's Jedi stuff, you got to have light side, dark side, and all the stuff going on. Great Jedi action stuff. And Quinlan, because he's an unconventional Jedi, doing unconventional things, and going about his mission in unconventional ways. And sort of, again, you get to explore the lure, the seduction of the dark side in a very interesting way that we hadn't seen to this point. Obviously we're very familiar with Anakin's fall, but there's more than one way to fall to the darkness. And Quinlan's fall is very fascinating in the book. Spoilers again. He does go dark. But it's sort of like this, it sort of has this weird self-deception to it where he thinks he's like a double agent when in fact he is not. But it's really, really well done. The relationship with he and Ventress is fascinating and fantastic and really, really wonderful. And then the next time we see Voss, we don't see Voss. We were supposed to see Voss. There was rumors that we were going to get to see Quinlan Vos in Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. There was going to be, I believe it was supposed to be a sequence on Kashyyyk where, Order 66 is going to come through, and Voss, if rumor holds, was going to get gunned down by his clone troopers, like we saw in the montage of Order 66 being executed. We saw his apprentice, Aayla Secura, get gunned down. I think she was on Seleucami. And instead, what we got was it didn't happen. It didn't pan out. Whether it was a change to have Yoda there or they didn't want Yoda and Voss there at the same time, I'm not 100% certain on those details. But we get the line from Obi-Wan Kenobi when Anakin arrives to the briefing that he's late for, that Master Voss has moved his troops to Boss Pity. And that's kind of it. But it's a nice reference. It's a nice inclusion of Quinlan Vos into the canon. And it's really the first time he's included in the canon. The story behind that is, and we'll tie it to his actual debut in just a moment, George Lucas became a big fan of the character who had spawned from the comic book series that Dark Horse was publishing. And he wanted to include the character. This is very much what happened with Aayla Secura as well. Lucas was reading these comics, and he liked several of these characters. And Quinlan Vos has such an interesting origin from how they came up with him, from what transpired with his creation, that I'm sure Lucas was delighted by the whole process and was sort of just as enamored as the fans were with the character. What am I referring to? Quinlan Vos, his entire look is based off of a character in the background of a scene in Mos Espa in The Phantom Menace. You see him, it's a flash of a second, you see him like between Anakin and Qui-Gon Jinn. He's just sitting there at a table. And when writer John Ostrander and artist Jan Drosema were coming up with characters for their Star Wars comic that they were creating for Dark Horse, they were talking about a new Jedi character, and Jan Drosema said, I know exactly who this is going to be. They're already in The Phantom Menace. And John Ostrander was like, that's great. That's fantastic. Let's go. And she sent him the sketches, and he started making the stories, and it all kind of comes together. So you can actually see Quinlan Vos in canon in Episode 1 for a quick second. You may wonder at this point, well, why doesn't he announce himself to Qui-Gon Jinn? Why doesn't he step forward to help his fellow Jedi? This is part of Quinlan's character. Quinlan is again, he's sort of like the secret agent man for the Jedi Knights. And he was on a deep undercover mission. He's there with one of his underworld contacts, and he could not break cover to contact Qui-Gon Jinn. And by the time he could, Qui-Gon and Anakin and Obi-Wan were already back off Tatooine on their way to Coruscant. So, and this is stuff that's addressed in the comics. Like, if you want to know more about why Quinlan wasn't able to help or didn't come to aid Qui-Gon Jinn later in the story, he talks about that. He has massive regrets after he learns of Qui-Gon's passing at the end of Phantom Menace, and he talks about this. It's explored, it's covered, it's not left unsaid, which is a really nice aspect of it. But let's go ahead and talk now about more about the creation of Quinlan Vos. So let's go back in time. It's the early 90s. I want to say 1991. Star Wars comic books have not been a thing for at least 4 years, maybe even 5. I don't remember the exact time when Marvel stopped publishing the Star Wars comics, but there was nothing new going on with Star Wars. It was fading from people's memories. It was fading from people's minds. Dark Horse rolls around. Dark Horse is a small comic book publisher up in Oregon, and they have a nice reputation for publishing high-quality, independent comic books. And they start getting into the licensing game. and they inquire about getting the Star Wars comic book license. No one else wants it at the time, so they pick it up. They get it, and they start making new Star Wars comic books. I lost my mind. This is when we first get Star Wars Dark Empire, a sequel to Return of the Jedi, taking place 5 years after Jedi. Han and Leia are about to have their first kid, and a clone emperor is rising to bring the Empire back, and he is not happy about the way the Republic is trying to step back up again, and he's going to squash them down. But so we're getting new Star Wars content, and Dark Horse does a really great job for a very prolonged period of time of keeping the Star Wars comic books rolling and going and doing new things, exploring new territory, but also staying in the wheelhouse of the original trilogy, trying to bring new aspects to new stories. Not everything hits, not everything's great, but they do some fun stuff. And going going back into Star Wars time, going back into the what would be called Tales of the Jedi era, the old Republic, thousands of years before Luke Skywalker and Han Solo. They give us some really fun new stories that aren't restricted to the canon. And then something happens with Dark Horse. Still has the license. They're publishing Star Wars books. I wouldn't say that they're a huge, overwhelming success outside of like the Star Wars fans who know about them and who want them. But they're doing a great job. It's a popular line. And then all of a sudden, Lucas comes out. He's like, hey, by the way, I'm making more Star Wars movies. Dark Horse must have been thrilled. They have the license, they have the rights to publish the comic books, and now they're about to be able to do comic books that can operate concurrently of the prequel trilogy that he's planning to do with Anakin, his rise to Jedi greatness, and his fall to the Sith. And they're like, this must have been a huge boon to them. They must have been losing their minds. So they immediately launch a new Star Wars book that's going to be set in that prequel era. They wait for the Phantom Menace. The Phantom Menace comes out in '99, and they're on it. They know they have access. They're a licensee. They get to look at some of the characters. They get to look at some of the designs, what things are going to look like, what this new era of the galaxy is going to be visually, and they're able to incorporate that into a new Star Wars comic book series that will be taking place during the prequel era. And the first big arc has to do with Ki-Adi-Mundi, a Jedi that we only see in the Jedi Master Council chambers. The Jedi Council chambers. He's a Jedi Master at that point. But the events of that first arc take place just prior to the Phantom Menace. And those are sort of like the first chinks in the armor, in the sense that Dark Horse has his license, but they can't really tell too many, Obi-Wan, Anakin, main canon character storylines, because obviously the films take priority. So like whatever they could tell these stories, but they might be quickly refuted. Be like, no, you can't do that with Obi-Wan and Anakin. Sorry, it's not happening. We got plans, and just you can't go near that. So eventually, John Ostrander is going to take over the book. Tim Truman is writing a great arc with Asherad Het and Ki-Adi-Mundi on Tatooine involving the Tusken Raiders. It's a fantastic story called Outlander. Check it out. Ostrander is recommended by Truman to take over the book. And he does. And Ostrander comes about it with a whole new perspective, which is and again, this is what they had been doing before. They were messing with the Jedi that they had known, that they had access to, that they could tell other stories about, as long as it was before certain things. So they were kind of trying to dance between the raindrops, as the expression goes. Ostrander comes on board and quickly presents the idea. It's like, listen, when we can use Obi-Wan and Anakin, like, great, let's do that. But in the meantime, like, instead of having to do this waltz around the continuity, around events of the film that may contradict something that we do, why don't we make our own Jedi? Why don't we make our own bad guys? Why don't we kind of make our own little corner of the Star Wars galaxy and populate it with Jedi that we can do whatever we want with? Because not only do we get to do whatever we want with them, but there's actual stakes. We can kill characters, and it would have resonance. Part of the problem of being a licensee, you can't tell the death of Obi-Wan Kenobi story. A, we already know how he dies, but B, we wouldn't believe you. Like, if you show me a story where Obi-Wan dies during the Clone Wars, I don't believe you. I know how Obi-Wan meets his maker, and the same thing applies to Anakin. Now the Clone Wars animated series has done a nice job of kind of elevating the tension, but you still know the outcome. So Ostrander pitches this to the editors. I believe it's Randy Stradley at Dark Horse. And he buys in. He's like, you know what? You're right. Let's give this a go. Let's see how it goes. Let's see how the fans like it. So he reaches out to his artist, Jander Sema, who's going to be coming on board doing the first arc together. And she loves the idea. And like I mentioned before, she knows exactly who she wants this first Jedi to be. Quinlan Vos. We've already seen him in the Phantom Menace in a blink and you miss it kind of moment. And then they spin the story out, creating the character, fleshing him out. And again, like I said, Quinlan Vos is very much the Jedi that we meet in the Phantom Menace. If I were to turn a critical eye towards them, they aren't with the exception of Qui-Gon, who himself is a bit of an outsider amongst the Jedi. The Jedi are not like the sort of swashbuckling heroes that maybe we all thought they were prior to the prequels. They were much more reserved, much more conservative. They're very monk-like, the studying the Force, the will of the Force. A lot of these terms are thrown around, and you understand it more. It makes sense now. Like we're all totally in line with that train of thought now. But prior to Episode 1 in the prequel movies, we all sort of had our own ideas about what a Jedi really was. We didn't really know for sure. We just knew they wore robes. And, Lucas had described them as monk-like, and the Force is sort of like the boiling down of all religions into one thing. But that never really, again, you still sort of don't really know the codes, like what their mantras are. A little bit from Yoda, a little bit from Obi-Wan, but there's still a lot of white material on the board, like a lot of room to cover. Sorry. Room to cover. And so Ostrander is going to play with that a little bit. So they create Voss, and then they create his master, his Jedi Master, Master Thome, and they create Voss's Padawan, Aayla Secura, and they all have this very interesting, unique relationship with the Force. Master Thome is sort of like this Jedi. I think they call him like Jedi Watcher. He sort of watches the Force. He watches for signs of the dark side, but he sort of has studied the dark side more than many Jedi have, which makes him an outsider. Quinlan, as a child, has come in close contact with the dark side, and it's always kind of been a part of him. He is a Kafir, that is his species, and he has the ability of psychometry, which means that he has a tactile ability to place his hands on an object and derive and absorb its memories. So he is forced to he's forced by his aunt in the comic books. This is comic books. This is not the canon of the TV show. In the comics, he is forced to place his hands on a medallion that has been worn by his mother when his mother and father were being murdered. And so that darkness has sort of always been born into Quinlan Vos. Master Thome decides that the child has displayed enough Force ability, and it's not safe for him to stay on his home planet. I don't want to go too much into everything that's non-canon about his time on his homeworld. Suffice to say that Quinlan Vos is one of the few Jedi Knights who is very much aware of his parents, of his homeworld, of what a sort of role was expected of him before he left for the Jedi Temple. Now, in the canon, again, a lot of that stuff gets pushed off the side, and Quinlan is referred to as a Jedi who has been raised in the Temple. They don't expand too much on that in Clone Wars cartoon or in the Dark Disciple novel. So we're sort of left to infer. But Master Thome does play a part in that book. Aayla Secura does play a part in that book. And much like his comic book counterpart, Quinlan has been touched by the dark side in some way. So he is this character who has to wrestle with it. And while he may always think he's on the light side, he has to pause and wonder, am I really? And his actions, again, make him a bit of a Jedi outcast. In the comics, another interesting aspect of this character. And again, we see him at various stages of his development. From pre-Temple to Padawan era, training with Obi-Wan Kenobi, to Jedi Knight, and eventually to Jedi Master. Like, we get the full range of this character in the comic books. And one of the really interesting aspects of him is, because he's already an outsider, when the Clone Wars break out on Geonosis, he doesn't fall in line with the rest of the Jedi and become a general and start commanding clone troopers and legions of clone troopers and battalions of clone troopers. He eventually gets there, but initially when the war breaks out, he decides he's going to run basically like a spy network in the Confederacy of Independent Systems. He's going to have a chain of spies that are getting information to the Jedi, to the Republic, so they can bring the Clone Wars to an end. He is sort of like the spy master Jedi in the comic books. And it's a really fascinating take for a Jedi. It's a really interesting perspective and point of view for a Jedi Knight to have. Another interesting aspect of the character, and again, this is echoed in the Dark Disciple book, when he decides he's going to infiltrate Count Dooku. Voss is going to bring this war to an end. He's going to infiltrate and then eventually turn, betray, and possibly kill Count Dooku, though I think he makes a lot of proclamations about arresting him and bringing him to justice. But at the time, and again, it's a great chunk of the comics where Voss is working for Dooku. The Jedi believe he has turned. He's committed assassinations to ingratiate himself to Dooku. Again, he's dancing with the dark side. This is a character who is he's he's the Fred Astaire of dancing with the dark side, if you will. So it's a really fun read, a different way to be seduced by the dark side than some of the stuff we'd read in expanded universe novels, or what we were expecting to see from Anakin's fall during the course of Episode 3. And the seductions along the way in Episode 2. You know what I'm talking about. So it's really, really wonderful. What also happens is that we know at this point, for the fans, we know the code. You can't be with anyone. You're a Jedi, and that's it. You sort of like have this like code of abstinence. Like you're not going to be married and having kids and living that life. That's not for you. Well, in the comic books, Quinlan has a relationship. He falls in love with one of his spies, basically. This character named Kayleen. And at the end of the Clone Wars, they run off together. They have a son. It's a whole thing. It's wonderful because you spend so much time with Quinlan. You're so happy that he's avoided Order 66. Now, as I said, in the comic books, because based on the original screenplay, Voss is on Kashyyyk. That's where the clone troopers turn on him. In canon, it's very different. Voss does come around to commanding clone troopers, but he's on Boz Pity. And we don't know his final fate until recently. Last year, I believe it was issue 7, Charles Soule's Darth Vader comic book. One of the Inquisitors presents a list of Jedi that they are still looking for. This is set, I believe it's set around the time of right after New Hope. There's a list. It's in Aurebesh. The third name down, translated from Aurebesh, Quinlan Vos. So in theory, Voss is still alive in canon, as well as in the expanded universe. Now, again, I'm going to spoil the Dark Disciple novel. He also falls in love, but this time it's with Asajj Ventress, who sacrifices her life to save him and bring him back to the light side and stop Dooku from killing him and getting him back with the Jedi. That book's more about Ventress than it is Voss, but their relationship is so fantastic and fabulous that I do highly, highly recommend it, even though I just told you how it ends. But I suspect you know how it ends. And Ventress is a great character too, and she will be spotlighted in an upcoming episode as well, because she has an interesting duality between the Tartakovsky Clone Wars show, in which she debuted, the Clone Wars comic books that Dark Horse was publishing, like we're just talking about, and the Clone Wars series that Dave Filoni and George Lucas created. So Ventress is another character who has like this sort of multifaceted existence. That'll be really fun to explore. So Voss, let's get back to Voss though. Voss is a Jedi that I really dig. A lot of his exploits in the comic books are a little hard to come by right now, unfortunately. You can find some collections on Comixology if you want to go digital. But if you are a bit of more of a scoundrel and you want to read your comic books via unscrupulous sources, by all means, check out the appropriate websites. I'm assuming you have them if you are the rapscallion that you claim to be. And go check them out. They're the series from Dark Horse. You can read the whole book, the whole series. I believe it started in late 98. It's just called Star Wars. Kai Adamundi's on the first cover. And Voss is introduced, I think, in issue 16 or 17. And you'll start to go on the journey with him. And again, there's a lot of inner slicing with our other characters, Anakin and Obi-Wan and Rex. Well, maybe not Rex, but other clone troopers of importance weave their way through the series. And I think you will have a really good time exploring Quinlan Vos in the old expanded universe, what's now dubbed as the Legends canon. So much fun, such a unique character. Again, the way he dances with the light and the dark, his sort of relentlessness when it comes to what he believes is right, even though it may be taking him into the dark. Fascinating stuff. And again, his Jedi Master Thome is very, very interesting. His lightsaber teacher, Sora Bulk, fantastic character. His apprentice, Ayla Secura, we've talked a little bit about her in the past. She's fantastic. The woman he will break his Jedi code for, Kayleen, fantastic. Highly recommend going back into the Legends. I don't know how much appeal Legends has to Star Wars fans now. I feel like sometimes you see that Legends banner, you're like, it doesn't count anymore, so I don't care. You're missing out on some really great Star Wars stuff if that's your point of view. And as Obi-Wan has told us, from a certain point of view, I like to think you're wrong. Give these a try. Dip your toe into these waters. John Ostrander is a phenomenal comic book writer. He's been writing comic books for, almost 30 plus years, right? At this point, he's legitimately fantastic. He created the Suicide Squad. He created the best version of DC's The Spectre character. He's written insane comic books over the years, Grimjack, and so many, many more. And his Star Wars work is phenomenal. After this, he and Jan Duursema, the artist he would most commonly be linked with in the Star Wars run, would go on to create Star Wars Legacy, which was the one that was set like 100 or 200 years in the future with descendants of Skywalker. And that's a fantastic book because they created Imperial Knights, Jedis who work for the Empire. The Empire is not quite the same as you remember it, so it makes a little bit more sense when you read the book. But it was one of the most fantastic concepts that anyone had ever thought of for Star Wars. And the book is gorgeous because as great a writer as John Ostrander is, Jan Duursema is phenomenal. She is a comic book legend who probably doesn't rightly get as much credit as she deserves for being one of the most fantastic female artists in a very male-driven industry. So check out her art, support her art. She's got a fun little fan Patreon page going on where you gain access to all the amazing sketches that she does. And her and Ostrander are working on some new comic books they're putting out together on what's that Kickstarter. Yeah, they're doing some books on Kickstarter in Indiegogo. So check out their stuff. But their Star Wars work is phenomenal. Maybe it doesn't all count to canon anymore, but as we have talked about, as we have seen, some elements of Legends, of what has that gold Legends banner on it, is making its way into the proper canon now. Is Quinlan Vos going to be one of those Jedis who makes the jump? We'll see. We will see. Obviously, like the Kayleen stuff will probably be housed because the Ventress relationship is canon. But still, Voss is still Voss. That's the neat part about this character, in my estimation. Like the version that we get of him in Star Wars: The Clone Wars and in Dark Disciple is still very much the character that we have in the Star Wars comic book. The Star Wars Republic comic book, I believe, was the banner title. Star Wars Republic. And it chronicling the Clone Wars. There's not a lot of difference between the two characters. Again, you don't get a lot of his backstory that you get in the old Legends canon. I should not say Legends and canon in the same. That should not be connected. Disregard that. But in the old Legends universe stuff, you had a lot more background there. Really rich history for the character. I am curious if some of that might be imported over at some point, if we do get to follow up with Quinlan Vos at some point soon. Again, fairly recently, made aware that he is alive in the current new canon of the comic books. And they're bringing back Kira, right? We're seeing crazy Kira stuff going on. Why not see some stuff with Quinlan Vos in the very, very near future? And I think that's all I have to say about that. I hope I sort of kind of ruined Dark Disciple. But again, read it. It's good. It's a really fun book. And you kind of know where it's going anyways. But it's a great read. It's a great journey. It's a great closing point for the Ventress character. And again, we will talk about more about Ventress in another episode. But it's a great book for Voss as well. And by all means, if you can find the Star Wars Republic books by John Ostrander, Jan Duursema, and they're phenomenal. They are fantastic. They were so entertaining, so well written, so amazingly drawn. Like the art's just gorgeous. The art, the coloring, the page layout. These are dynamic comic books, and they got to do these really fun stories. Like I didn't even talk about some of the supporting cast characters that we did, that were non-Jedis that are in this book. It's a really rich universe, and Ostrander and Juscelino get so much credit for making a really rich comic book universe, and one with stakes because they made these new characters, and Lucas picked up on that and brought them over into the canon. Quinlan Vos and Aayla Secura made the jump from the comic books to the big screen. I don't think you get a higher compliment than that. That's something you created for a comic book, because you didn't have the ability to use Obi-Wan and Anakin in a meaningful way. So you create new whole cloth characters, and they make that transition. They become fan favorites, and and Lucas is like, yeah, they're great. Bring them over, which, again, it's comparing apples and oranges. But the people who control Star Trek, do you think they're sitting around reading all the Star Trek comics and the Star Trek novels? How exciting is it to think that George Lucas sat down and read your Star Wars comic book and liked what you did so much that he's like, yeah, that character's coming over here. And that's a really rad compliment. And, I hope one day, fingers crossed, because I would love, I will make the effort. I am going to make the effort. I'm going to put myself out there. I would love John Ostrander or Jan December to come on this podcast and talk about this whole time, because it would be phenomenal. And I think everyone would love that interview. So I am going to try my hardest to make that happen sometime in this year. I'll be honest, my year gets very, very busy in September, but I am going to try so hard. I want interviews to start happening on this podcast, and we're going to do our best to make it happen. With that being said, I want to thank everyone so much for taking the time to download, listen, subscribe, and share this show with all the other Mandalorians in your covert. It means the world to me. Whether you have been listening since day one or this is your first time, welcome to Mandovision. Nargai Tom, please follow us on social media. It's at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. I probably should have mentioned, I think we even have a Facebook page going right now. Head over there, give us a like. Those are always appreciated. That would mean the world to me, because I think Facebook's useless. But if you're on it, click like, and I'm going to make sure there's content on there. So do it. Do it. Was that too thirsty? Was I too thirsty on that one? Anyways, I so much appreciate your support for this small independent Star Wars podcast. It means the world to me. And we will be back very, very soon, because Star Wars Clone Wars Rewatch Monday is only 2 days away. 3 days away? 3 days away. I don't know. Whatever. It's a podcast. You listen to it whenever you want. I put it out on Monday, but you don't have to listen to it Monday. You can listen to it Wednesday. It's up to you. You're the boss. All right, let's get out of here. I'm getting silly. I'm just living high off that Quinlan Vos life. I mean, there's an episode, there's some issues of the comics where Quinlan and Aayla get all super high on the Ryle Spice, and they lose their memories, and the whole thing happens. It's crazy. Go check that out. All right, good stuff. I will be back soon. You know I will. In the meantime, you all stay safe, stay smart, be good people, be good to each other, be good Star Wars fans, and get more Star Wars fans to check out Star Wars. Whether it's a comic book, a movie, cartoon, TV show, video game. By the way, that new Star Wars Lego video game, woo, looks pretty good. But yeah, always bring more fans to the fold. That's what we like to do here. Spread the word. Star Wars is the best. I will talk to you all very, very soon. But this podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.